This time on the Prop Master, I finished up a video that I posted in a bit of a hurry a couple of weeks ago regarding some emergency changes that I had made to the ear modules. So we're just going to finish up that video with some more details on some changes that I made to the different ear modules. I know it's been a while since I've posted anything, but let me assure you that I've not just been laying around the house this whole time. I've been working on a couple of different projects. One of them is the completion of these two ear modules. They're just a little bit different from the ones that I did in the original video. For one thing, they're twice as thick. They come out from the helmet twice as much. There's some painting differences. I made this where it'll open up in case you need to access the arm. You can kind of see the difference. So it does stick out quite a bit more. And it's a bit more like the actual prop is than this version here that we did originally. The other project that I've been working on is I have started working on the patterns for the Sabine Wren helmet, which is a project that if I had realized how much more work it was going to be, I probably would have thought of something else to do. But I'd already told my daughter that I would definitely do it. So I was stuck, and it's been some difficulties. I've had to do some things that I've never done before, but to be honest, I'm pleased with the results. Things are going well, and hopefully that video will be up shortly. So let's get on with the show. I've cut most of the pieces out now. This is the second level of the left ear module, and I used it after I cut it out to cut out a second piece because I don't have any half-inch thick wood. So I'll have to glue these two quarter-inch pieces together. And I went ahead and cut out and rounded this part here, but I left this part that needs to come out until after I can glue this piece onto it. I've used the barge cement just so I can quickly get through this, and I've already glued everything up with a second layer which is dried. If you use the barge cement, you want to do as absolutely thin layers of glue as you can, but now that I have these, I'm going to go ahead and glue them together. Okay, and here is this piece, and I used my speed square to kind of continue this line around to the back so I could see exactly where I want this piece to attach. And you really want to do everything that you can to make sure that that lines up perfectly. You have this piece, and then this will be the top piece. And you want this to actually fit snugly right up against the whole thing so that you get one solid piece of half-inch thick wood here. And this piece I need to go ahead and glue up the same as I did for this one, because once again I just don't have anything that's a half-inch thick. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece out, and I'll see you after that. Okay, so here are the pieces. They're not glued up, they're just kind of laying there. And the left doesn't look bad, but I'm not very happy with the way the right turned out. If you see it from the side, it's kind of two-dimensional. If you look what we had before, it at least, this part at least stood out from it. Where now it's kind of flush. So on top of that, when you put this trim piece in place, I don't know if you can kind of see that, but the wood's actually sticking up a little bit higher than it is, and that's not going to work at all, especially since the foam is flexible and compressible and the wood isn't. So I'm going to call an audible right now and change everything up midstream, and I'm going to go with the first layer pieces on 1/8 inch instead of 1/4 inch, and then we'll add a second piece in under here. So I'll talk about that more in a second. So here's the plan. This is out, and I've marked the first level on this thinner, half as thick piece of 1/8 inch wood, and using my template here, I just lined it up so that it's just this top part here and not the part that's going to bevel, and use that to mark up this second piece of 1/8 inch. So what we have is an 1/8 inch first level, and then this stuff stays the same, and I'll put this second piece of 1/8 inch in. That way when we put the second and third level above, we'll get some difference in height. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut that out, and we'll get on the process again. So here's what it looks like with the 1/8 of an inch first layer instead of a 1/4 of an inch. And you can see that if I put the trim piece in there, it's going to work much better. Let me drop this down a bit. Okay, now you can kind of see the actual relief of it. So I'm much happier with that. And again, it's just the same as it was before, only this is now 1/8 of an inch, and then you cut this one piece out that is 1/8 of an inch. Okay, I think I'll show you a couple of pictures, one of the new way of doing it, and compare that with the way it was before with the 1/4 inch first layer. So let's glue this all together, and we'll think about painting it. Okay, I have all the pieces here, and I'm going to glue them together using the barge cement, because at this point I'm just attaching them to each other, and the barge cement is going to allow me to just stick them on there and not have to worry about any clamps or anything like that. If you use the wood glue at this point, you'd have to clamp everything up. It would be moving around, trying to find room for the clamps without damaging anything. Trust me, the barge cement will be much better for this part. Just a matter of carefully lining up one edge and then putting it in place. Now on this piece right here, this is the 1/8 inch spacer that I'm putting in right here so that this will end up higher up. Now I'm going to go ahead and have to put some barge cement on here, and when I get that ready to put this piece on, I'll be back. Okay, these have both had 2 coats and they're ready to put on. And if you notice, I have the centerpiece marked on this spacer. And if you end up forgetting to do that, don't worry about it. Just flip the piece over, take your pattern and put it upside down and just lay it onto your piece and mark the back side of it. This piece doesn't get glued on because you can't put that on until we actually put the arm on. But here we have it. I think it's closer to what the actual piece looks like. The actual prop and the extra steeper angles here because of the extra height are going to make it look better. So after just a little bit of cleaning up the edges and everything, here are the 2 pieces. I think they definitely look better than the versions that I did in the video itself. Now as far as gluing, I just want to go over this again. What I would do is, the day before you want to start this part of the project, maybe right before you start putting together the main part of the helmet in foam, take your 1/4 inch pieces and using wood glue and clamps, glue up some pieces like this that you can then use your pattern to determine which size pieces are, but then take your pattern and draw out your pattern from there. That way these will have a good 24 hours to dry and be good and solid. When you do the final assembly, I would definitely use the barge cement so that you don't have to clamp things up and worry about things moving around on you. At this point, you could easily just attach this to the helmet, go ahead and put in your little arc of 3mm foam, install your rangefinder, and glue this right into position, and everything will be fine. I have another idea though, and I'm going to go ahead and take you through that. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to add an 1/8 inch piece of basswood right here, which will make this quite a bit larger, and if I just left it as it is, the rangefinder would be awfully loose in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a 4mm piece of foam, kind of like we did in the original video, that covers this entire area. But I'm going to do it on this. I'm going to go ahead and do it on this piece right here. So it'll be this entire area here will be that 4mm foam. And since I put this spacer on here, you're going to need another 1/8 inch spacer for right here. That way when I drop this on, I've got that extra height difference between the two that I like, but it doesn't move the whole assembly even higher up. And with that 4mm foam, it'll make a nice braking mechanism for the rangefinder, so it'll stay wherever you want it. I'm going to go ahead and glue these pieces up real quick. They already have 2 coats of barge cement on them, so I'm going to go ahead and drop them into place. First, this little spacer down here, and then this piece I'll go ahead and put here. I just think by putting it on the top layer, I can go ahead and that'll help me fit the piece of foam in here a lot easier than if I glue it onto here. Okay, so next up will be the foam that's going to go right here. In order to get the right shape, take your piece and just line up the top layer and then you're just going to take the upper right second level, upper part of the second level, and I'm going to go ahead and draw the circle here just so that I can use it to line the rest of this up. Let me just draw the rest of the circle. So this is the part that you want. This is the part that you want right here. And this is just waste. So now you can see here the way it's going to look. That way it still has that narrow slit. And you've got a nice gap now between the height here and the height here. So now it's just a matter of attaching this. And just like before, you could go ahead and just attach this, connect the rangefinder, and then glue this in place. But I've never have liked the fact that once you do that, you're stuck. You can never get back to the rangefinder again. So I've got an idea on how I can make this stay, but make it where it's removable. Before I work on attaching this top piece, I thought I'd better go ahead and make the arm for the rangefinder. So I did that. It's out of a 1/4 inch poplar. The problem I found at that point was that my foam was not causing any drag on it. And I went back and forth about 10 different ways of trying to work on that. And I realized that the problem that I was having was that I had heat sealed this foam before I put it on, or the other foam, before I put it on. And that had caused it to shrink just enough that there was no longer any drag. But after trying 5mm foam that I sanded down a little bit, and about 10 other things, you can see all the remnants of glue there. The answer was so simple, I can't believe I overlooked it for so long. Ignore the 4mm foam, go with your regular 3mm foam, and stick a washer right there. That'll give you the advantage of picking this piece up off of the wood, so it's not dragging along this surface of wood all the time and trying to scratch the paint off. That'll bring that up. Use a thin washer. This one is pretty much right at 1mm, maybe just a tiny bit thicker than that. So that'll also push that up into this foam more, giving you the drag you need for so that the 3mm foam will work just fine. It's a win-win. It's simple, and I don't know why I didn't think of it before. So that's your answer for that. 3mm foam, thin washer, and everything should work fine. Now I can get back to attaching this onto here. So what I want to do is to drill 3 holes, shallow holes, one here, one here, and one here. I'm going to use a Forstner bit for that. A Forstner bit, let's see if I can grab one. This is a Forstner bit, and what it does is it makes a very clean hole. But I mean, you can use it just like a regular drill bit, but what it does really well at is making a hole that doesn't go all the way through so that you can put something else in. So I've taken my Forstner bit, and these are the magnets that I'm going to put in there. They are thinner and wider than the ones that we used on the neck ring. These are 3/8 of an inch, whereas the thicker neodymium magnets are 3/10 of an inch, which doesn't work to any bit that I have. So I'm going to use these so that I can drill a very precise hole. And I'll use 2 of them. I'll just glue them together. That way you'll have the extra strength of having that much larger magnet. And so I just took my bit and took this magnet and lined it up and put a piece of tape there. And just put a piece of tape there so I know how deep to make it. Now with that tape there, it kind of clogs up with sawdust, so I may have to stop and clean that out a couple times. If I should just push the tape down the... Yeah, that definitely... It worked the first time, but the tape just doesn't grip that well, so I kind of pushed it down. The tape just went down the bit itself, so now I've got to fill that with something. But I might as well go ahead and do the other holes while I'm at it. Just a tiny bit more. Okay, that's going to work good. So I drilled these holes to be deep enough, perfectly deep enough for 2 magnets. And I put 3 magnets in here. Now on this one, since I drilled it too much, I have these little washers that are pretty much the same size. And I put one of those in there, and it was still just a little bit deep. So then I put just a tiny bit of wood filler in there and shoved the maggots in there until they were just the right height, and then pulled them out and everything was fine. So now I've just got to transfer these marks over to here. So I've just got a paint pen, and I'm just going to very quickly kind of cover them with a lot of paint. Then quickly get this into position. push down on it, and hopefully it'll be marked when I bring it up. And it is close enough anyway. This one didn't quite do, but I can tell by its shape where the center is going to be, and that's all I really need. Let me say that again. I can tell by its shape where its center is, and that's all I really need. So now I just have to repeat the holes over here. This time I'm going to make it just deep enough for one magnet. Okay, so I have these drilled out, and they are precisely the right depth for one magnet. And I'm going to test the alignment. I have 3 magnets over here so that they're sticking up by 1, and I should be able to just line everything up. Oops. And it does close. So now I'm going to go ahead and start gluing the magnets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue 3 of these groups together. So I've already glued 2 sets together, but I'm going to show you how to do it with this last one. So I slid them apart, put that one down. I'm going to take just the tiniest amount of super glue, put 1 dab there, and put another tiny dab on the other side. I'm going to try to control this a little bit, but probably more I do. There we go. And the best thing is that it acts as its own clamp. Probably the more you try to control that, the worse it's going to be. So now we have three pairs of glued magnets. It's kind of a challenge. You have to keep them far enough away from each other that they don't attract themselves to each other or anything metal. But I'm going to give those about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, to make sure they're completely dry, and then we'll start to put them in. Okay, so I've glued my 3 pairs, and now what I've done is I just took a single and stuck it on there. Make sure the single's on top. Now I'm going to mark each one of those. That mark is just going to tell me that that is the side that goes into this piece here, that side in. Because if you get these reversed, they'll repel instead of attract. So now I'm just going to super glue that, the sides as well, and then I'm going to slide that top piece off and move it. Remember, this is upside down, so that right side is now the left side over here. I'll do the same thing here. So now let's go ahead and glue these in. You can see that, can you? And the mark goes down. So I'll let those cure up, and then we'll see how it goes. Okay, here it is. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a crack where it's not quite flush. And what it is this magnet and this magnet are just the tiniest little bits sticking up. So what I'd like to do would be to take this over to the belt sander and just hit it with the belt sander, but underneath the belt of the belt sander is a steel plate, so that's problematic with these magnets. It just grabs on way too hard. So I think what we're gonna have to do is get the sanding sticks out. Okay, everything's good. In the end, I ended up taking a Dremel with one of those little sanding drums so I could get in there good. And all of this would not be a problem, except that early on in the process, I accidentally glued the top of this instead of the bottom of it. So it's got a nice little thin coat of barge cement to hold on to all this dust. So let's go ahead and put this together. Can't get any simpler now. I still have the 4mm foam here, so I'm not putting a washer on here, but you will be using 3mm foam, so you're going to want to put one of these little thin washers in place. And gotta get far enough away. Here we go. There's no movement at the top or anything. It's on really well. Also, you can take it off if you need access to here to do anything. Also, it allows, I'll be able to paint the inside of this and this separately, and then, you know, it just goes back together. So let's go ahead and start the painting process. I have a couple of new ideas on that as well. So let's get started on that. Since the last time you saw me, the only thing that I've done is to give everything a light sanding, and I finished up my last primer can, doing one thin coat of primer all over it. So I'm going to try to put quite a few coats of primer on this, just so I can see if I can get a really nice finish on it. So let's go ahead and start up with coat number 2. As usual, the wind is blowing like crazy whenever I'm trying to paint. This is a little bit different. Instead of the usual filler and primer, this is just filler, also from Duplicolor. I'm just going to put a whole bunch of this, layers of this on there, sand it up good, and then I'm going to put one last layer of the combination filler primer on at the end. I'm just trying to make sure that I get fill as many of the cracks between the pieces of wood as possible, as well as trying to hide any wood grain. Now I'm tangled up in my microphone cable. I have much more respect for people that host programs now. Okay, so hopefully that's enough filler on there to seal up anything that needs sealed up. I'm just going to lightly sand everything so that it's got a nice smooth surface. We'll see how that goes. This is just a foam, very, 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 very fine foam sanding block. I'm very lightly sanding this, because I'm not used to the product and I don't know how much pressure I can put on here before it just starts to sand to nothing. Let's see what happens when I switch over. This is a little bit more coarse, but it's still quite fine. It's 320 grit. I'm just trying to smooth out areas like here where it's got almost looks like serrations. They also have these little fine needle files. Good for getting into these little tight areas. Okay, finally, I've got one more coat to put on. I'm going to do it a fairly heavy coat, and that should be the last layer of this not particularly exciting gray paint, and then we can go on to something a little bit more fun. So one last layer, heavy. Okay, now we can move on to something more fun. Okay, so all I've done at this point since the last time you saw me was to let this stuff dry for over 30 minutes and then lightly sand it, very lightly sand it with an 800 grit sandpaper. And I'm ready to start painting on the fun part. I'm going to do things a little bit differently this time than we did last time. I'm going to go ahead and start things out with a coat of silver for the whole thing. I'm going to use this silver special metallic. Now, I've learned in the past that you have to be kind of careful with this stuff. If you get it on too thick, it seems to take days for it to dry. So I'm going to try to do thin coats. Which is not going to be easy because it comes out quite intently. Okay, so I'm just going to wait about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and then I'll put another coat on. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop right there and make sure I don't end up with a drip or something like that. So I think it looks good. It's amazing how you can start seeing little dings and things that you couldn't see with the primer, but it really shows up now. But this is Boba Fett's helmet, so that's going to be perfect. This stuff needs to dry for, you know, it says up to 12 hours or up to 24 hours, so I'm going to go ahead and let it dry for, you know, at least 12 hours. And then we'll go on to the next step. I've let this dry for about 14 hours and it is still a little bit soft, but I haven't posted a new video in a while, so I don't want to wait another 10 hours for this to completely dry. I mean, it feels fine and it's strong enough that it doesn't, I mean, I can't do anything with my finger. But the other thing that I've done since then was to sketch the areas that I want the silver to come through, and you can see the pencil more gouged out the paint as to mark on the paint. You can kind of see over here. is really just more dug in than marked, so you can tell that the paint's a little bit soft, but I think it's going to be fine. So what I'm going to do now is, oh, the other thing that I did was I did remove the paint from these magnets here. So now I'm just going to mask off the areas that I want to stay silver, and then we'll move on from there. Masking fluid is dry now, so it's time to move on to some tape. Now, I messed up here. I not really messed up, but I need to use tape for this, so I'm a little quick on using the masking fluid because it's just going to get pulled up when I take the tape off. But this one still works, and you know, it's fine. So let's finish masking these off. Okay, so right about now you're probably looking at this and what I have masked off and thinking to yourself, okay, he's going to spray paint some gold. And that would make sense, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something that I thought about doing last time, but in the end didn't do it. I'm going with this, and the color's not important. I just went with a fairly light color so that it wouldn't affect the final product very much. What you want to go with is the textured part. I wouldn't go with anything as coarse as the stone texture, but just make sure it just says, I think it's usually like multicolor textured. This stuff usually has a pretty good velocity to it. I'm trying not to get too thick, but it's hard to when this stuff comes out so violently. And I'll let that dry and check it out, and then I'll probably put on one more coat. Okay, that should probably do it for the texture that I'm looking for. In fact, it was probably good enough before I put the second coat on. But I wanted to make sure that I got these bottom edges and along the sides. So as soon as this dries, about 30 minutes, we can go on to the gold. Okay, this is all dry now. Let me see if I can pull one of these up here so you can kind of see. That's the texture you're looking for. It's just a slight sandy texture. And the look we're going for is this right here. It's just kind of a texture that you see on, or in the past I've seen on electronics and stuff. It's just a slight beaded texture. And I'm just going to use my special metallic gold for that, right on top of the textured, multicolored textured. Avoid the urge to try this. It was sitting right there, so I thought, you know what, I'll give it a shot. But instead of this, you end up with this, and I don't know if you can see the difference on camera. This is, I don't know, it looks a little bit more like a fiberglass gel coat with a lot of flakes in it, whereas this just looks like gold that's been hit with a bead blaster or something. Just got a texture on it, whereas this looks like individual flakes. Also, this color is more like pyrite than gold or bronze. And it's also very gooey when it comes out of the can. I had to stop just to do this one little bit. I had to stop twice to clean out the nozzle. So go with any of the multicolored textured dupe. You can probably get away with one coat of that, and then go over it with some of this gold. This is a lot like the silver, so don't go on too thick if you can help it. It's also tough because it's reflective, so you think you're not getting any on there at all, but you're actually putting a lot on, but it's reflecting the, the dark. I'm just trying to make sure that I get the sides. Okay, I'll come back in about 5 to 10 minutes and give it another coat. It's been about 10 minutes and I hit it with the blow dryer, so you wouldn't want to mess with it too much, but it's dry enough to touch, which is just when I want to go ahead and remove the tape. Yeah, gotta be careful with my fingers. Any pressure at all. Yeah, I already messed up that little piece right there. I'll have to fix that. Yeah, it looks to me like that silver wasn't ready yet either. It couldn't handle the masking tape, so probably gonna have to make sure we wait a full 24 hours, or I can go ahead and do it with the brush. That's what I'll do. But for you, if you use that spray paint, you've got to wait a full 24 hours. I want to go ahead and wait for the gold to cure up a little more before I start trying to peel this part off. But you can see the effect. It'll look better when I repaint the silver. Just goes to show when you get in a hurry, it usually comes back to bite you in the butt. Not so much when you get in a hurry, but when you start cutting corners. Well, interesting. Oh, well, as soon as I started to say interesting enough, this one didn't have a problem. It pulled off that little corner right there. While we wait for that gold to completely dry, we'll go ahead and work on the other ear. So part of me thinks I should just scrape off all of the masking fluid and repaint that silver and then let it wait 24 hours, which is what I probably should do. But I'm gonna go ahead and press on and see how it turns out. Just more information for you guys. So I'm just gonna hit it with some of the primer. I'm just going to get some of a grayish color. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to make sure I cover up the little winglet there. And that dries really fast, so we'll be ready to put on the next coat in, well, actually, After this dries, we'll go ahead and do some more masking on it. So I'll probably wait at least an hour. Okay, so this primer's definitely dry now. So I'm going to go ahead and use the masking fluid again to mask off everything that I want to stay this gray color. And I'm going to start out by doing pretty much everything here and above. Now there was already the silver masked off before I put the gray on, so this won't be solid gray, but everything that's not silver will be gray. I think this cost about $17, this masking fluid, which is a little pricey, but at the same time, if you're going to do a Boba Fett helmet, it's probably worth the money, because so much of the paint is about chipped paint. I think if you're going to do a different Mandalorian helmet, then maybe you can get away with the toothpaste or mustard or whatever you want to use. And you can obviously do that with Boba Fett too, because that's what I did on the last one, but this masking fluid works so much better. Assuming, of course, that you let the under paint, you know, the silver in this case, completely cure or completely dry. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And once that completely dries, we'll go on and put the next color on, which is going to be the dark burgundy red. The masking fluid is dry now, so we're going to go ahead and do the red. It's a Rust-Oleum Claret wine. There's the color. And unlike the primer gray, we're going to go ahead and shoot everything with this. And then after this dries really well, we'll go ahead and mask it as well, and then we'll go on with the green. So the red is pretty much dry. Now it's time to mask off everything that I want to stay red. Some of the problem areas is that most of the red on this is very thin and it's on top of the silver. And the silver itself was kind of thin, so I couldn't really mask it very well without masking over where the red's going to be. So I'll probably come back at the end and add some red on top of some of the existing silver. I have already masked off this down here, so really all I have to do at this point is to mask off this entire little winglet here. I could use tape, it would actually be a lot easier, but I think that this might be a little bit more gentle to the actual paint. Now I'm not squeezing the bottle this whole time. I'll squeeze it for, to get some out, and then I kind of just spread it around. because otherwise I end up with just a massive amount. Okay, so once this dries, I'll go ahead and put the green down. The masking fluid is completely dry, and it's time to go ahead and put the green on. Again, this is the same green that I used on the helmet. It's the Satin Hunter Green by Krylon. Hit the whole thing with it. Doesn't have to be too thick on this first coat. Just want to make sure you kind of hit everything. And when this dries, I'll go ahead and hit it with a second coat. Since this is going to be the primary color, I want to go ahead and make sure I get a good even coat. Okay, when that dries, we'll go into the next step. So just like I did it with the helmet, I'm going to do a light dusting of this satin moss green. And when I say a light dusting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get about 2.5 to 3, be about 2 feet out. Maybe I'll move in to about 18 inches. I'm just trying to lighten the overall color and knock back a little bit of the blue that's in that green. You wouldn't necessarily have to use this moss green. Just use any kind of a dusty green that's not too blue. It's hard to describe it. You want a little bit more yellow than blue, and you want it to be a very pastel version of the color. Nothing too rich or saturated. So this is pretty much ready to add the next details to. So we're switching back over to the right side earpiece. It's actually been about a day and a half, so it's been almost 48 hours since I did the painting on this. So the paint's good and cured. There is one thing that I did do. I didn't like the texture on this top part, and so I sanded it all off and just painted it straight. So that's, you know, you can always do that. If you don't like the way it looks, you can always just sand it off and do it a different way. I also learned that if you put the masking fluid down and then use that textured paint on top of that, the textured paint is kind of almost like a latex with sand in it. That's what it appears to be. And so it does not play very well with the masking fluid. Instead of just taking off the small amount that's masked, it'll tear away large sections of the paint. In fact, this is what it used to look like before I sanded it down. As you can see, it's not very attractive. And I tried to paint it gold. I tried to paint the silver part gold to soften it out, but it still looked so bad that it's just, the only thing I could really do was to sand it down and start over. So let that be a lesson as well. Don't try to use the masking fluid and the textured paint. Okay, so I've already used the masking fluid here. I think you saw me do that on the first go around, so I didn't think it was really necessary to see it again. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the primer gray. That should do pretty well. Do one more. And just like before, the primer dries much quicker, so I'll be back very quickly to do the next color, or to mask this off and into the next color. I'm going to mask off everything that I want to stay gray. Okay, we'll let that dry, and then We'll do the red. Time for the red. Once again, I'm using this Rust-Oleum Claret wine satin. I'll let this dry overnight before I take everything out. Because I'm using the masking fluid, I can afford to let this paint dry overnight to make sure it's good and strong. If I were using the toothpaste or something like that, I'd have to just do this after maybe an hour, because I wouldn't want to leave it for that long. But with the masking fluid, I know that'll be okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the paint is completely dry and it'll have a nice flake to fit. Switching back to the left ear module, I'm just going to paint on this white little arch here. I just freehanded the outline, so if you're comfortable with that, you can do that as well. Otherwise, you can follow the same procedure that I explained in the main video. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry, and then if I need another coat, I'll go ahead and do it. Okay, we're just about ready to remove the masking fluid on this one. Once this white dries, I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with a matte spray, and then we'll be ready. Time to move back to this piece here. This is the top part of the right ear, and it's cured up nice. It's completely dry. I've taken my template again and put it on there and traced an outline for this center section again. And I'm just going to take some of my aluminum paint and a very hard, stiff, not very good brush. And I'm just going to more jab it along that line. If you get too much paint on your brush, it'll just be a glob and it won't look like a scratch. Try to stay as close to the outline as you can. You want it to be just a very thin little mark. But at the same time, this is, these are scratches. They don't have to be precise by any means. Don't get frustrated if things aren't looking right. They always work out in the end. I just have to remind myself what this looked like a few stages ago when it was really terrible. It doesn't look like much on the camera, I'm afraid, but let's see. That's a little better. And I'm going to come back, and after this completely dries, I'm going to come back with this little silver pen. It's a Pilot silver marker. I really like these pens. I know there's some other pens that are more common. The Sharpies are okay, but they don't have the little fine points like these have. There's another brand, I can't remember what brand it is, but they also make a little fine point one. I hate them. They're a lot like the white paint pens in that they don't do very much, and then when you finally get it to flow, it usually drops a big blob of paint right where you don't want it. But these little Pilots, I really like them a lot. So as soon as this dries, I'm going to come back with this. And so I'll go back and I'll put a very small highlight right down the middle of that. Not consistent, but it'll help a little, it'll add a little depth. So that's it for that one. So we're back to the left ear module. since I left, all I've done is I've added the graphic. I've also sprayed the entire thing with matte clear, so basically a spray matte. And now we're ready to take off all the paint that's over the masking fluid, and we'll see what we've got. This is just a stick that was left over for some of the other stuff, and it looked like it'd be pretty good for this. It's either basswood or balsa wood, so it's pretty soft stuff. I'm actually working on two different projects right now. I'm working on this one, and I've started working on making the shape of the Sabine Wren helmet. That way I can do something while I'm waiting for all this paint to dry. And it's actually taken away some time from this, and I've waited a couple of days since I put this on, and that might be affecting how well this fluid is working. Seems like the paint may have adhered a little better than I had anticipated, or was intended anyway. Some of these larger areas are going to get some red on top of the silver. Masking fluid is still working fairly well considering it's been several days. Can't tell if that's masking fluid or if it's just the paint peeling off there. I think that's probably just paint peeling off, so I'm going to stop with that. Like I said before, I'm going to go back in with some red on some of this, so I could just fill that back in. Can't forget the bottom. Okay, so all I have left on this, I'm going to go in with a little bit of the red and hit along this area and over in here and here a little bit, some of the larger silver areas. And then this piece will be pretty much done. I need to go ahead and give it a little bit of weathering, a little bit of distress with some black and brown paint. It is pretty close to being done. I also have the right side other than weathering, it is finished. Definitely need some weathering. This piece just pops off. Does a good job of going back in the right place. Okay, so let me get things ready and I'll put some red in here, and then once that dries, we'll be able to do some weathering. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit of this red in on top of the silver in a couple places. Ideally, I would have done this with the masking fluid, but it was such a small area of silver that it really would have been problematic. It was just easier to do the large area of silver and then come back afterwards and add some of the red in. The hard part is making this look like chipped paint and not like a blob of paint. One of the main things when you're trying to simulate chipped paint by painting on to the surface instead of removing the paint above it is you don't want any thin areas unless it looks like a scratch. You want it to be pretty, fairly opaque. I would think for the most part you'd want the red to be up against the green because it's supposed to be where something has ground through first the green paint and then the red paint to get to the silver. I'm looking at a picture of the paint scheme, otherwise I would not have put that red there. I think that's going to work. When that dries, we'll come back and do the last little bit of weathering on it, and it'll be done. Okay, so the only thing that I've done without you is I painted in the black here to simulate the hole, and I just couldn't get past or couldn't come to grips with the red being by itself surrounded by silver down here and a few other places. If it's supposed to be metal and then red paint and then green paint, I just can't understand why there would be red paint, pristine red paint on top of the silver with no green. It just didn't make any sense to me. So I reworked it a little bit so that it's green and then just a little bit of the red where it sort of cut through the green and red to get to the silver. Beyond that, I took advantage of the fact that I can remove this part, so I painted this and this part in here, and that's it. And we're ready to do the final weathering. And just like before, I'm going to use this decorative glaze that I've got that just happens to be brown, and my flat black. Even though this is glossy, it doesn't seem to do that much, so I don't have a problem with it. And I'm just going to take the black. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing at all or not. It's not. So I'm just taking my brush and loading it with some black paint, and then I'm wiping 90% of that paint off. And then waiting a second and wiping it off. I'm not going to try to wipe this off, I'm just going to leave it there. There's not very much black left in my brush, so I'm just kind of putting it where I kind of want it. Now where I get up here in the white, I'll try to wipe that off. That white's just a little too bright. Just going very lightly over some of this gold. This should stay in the little valleys there and should wipe off from the top. And pick up some of the brown. And be a little bit less aggressive in removing the glaze because it will come off a lot easier. This is where a little bit of a rougher brush would come in handy. See if I can find a brush that's a little bit more beat up than that one is. This one's pretty beat up. I'll have to come back and repaint on that black, because it's no good to have a supposed gap in the middle there and then have scrapes across where there's nothing there. This brush doesn't really hold paint now, so it's kind of difficult. That's a little more like what I was looking for. Now, we talked earlier about how you weren't able to use the masking fluid to make gouges in this gold surface here, because the texture paint that we used first is just a little bit too much like the masking fluid itself, and when you try to peel it off, it just peels large sections of the paint off. But now that this is completely cured, if you do want some scratches or big gouges here, and we're still going under the assumption that this is a gold surface with the silver metal underneath it, you just take a really sharp file, which is what I have here, and I want to make very carefully some very sharp little cuts. I suppose you could probably use a knife as well. Okay, now that I have those cuts, I'm going to come back with, I love this pen, this silver marker pen. It works so well. And they're just gonna put a line of silver down the scratch. And of course the problem is that the pen puts down a larger area of silver than the actual scratch is. So I'm going to give that a couple seconds to dry, and then I'm going to take a very small brush and come back in with the gold and paint over the silver right up to where the actual scratch in the surface is, so that instead of looking like a straight pin mark, it'll look more like a scratch through the gold into the silver. So as soon as this dries, we'll be back. While I'm waiting for this to dry, this silver to dry, I've sprayed some of the green spray paint into this the little disposable inserts for rollers. And when I was using that finer brush to try to get some scratches on here, I don't like the way it looks. It looks to me more like paint than worn paint. So I'm just gonna, if there's something you don't like, you can always get rid of it. kind of like that, but it's a little too much. Yeah, I really like these little paint tray inserts. They make it a lot easier when you're using spray paint. Or at least spray paint with a brush. I can live with that. And while I'm at it, I guess I could get the flat black out real quick. Yeah, I just want to fill in all these areas that have scratches. Like right there where I went over the silver, I'm not too worried because I can come back with that silver pin and clean that up nice. It's a little bit hard to do this where you can see what I'm doing. That's always my excuse for anything that I do wrong. And by now that silver should be good and dry. So I have a separate tray for the gold. Okay, so I just want to kind of paint on all of the textured area going up to where the scratch is. It won't be real obvious, but the sun or the lights will catch these little scratches of silver in this gold. It will show up in as a reflection. Now we just have one last thing to do. And there's 3 little holes normally right down in here in this little area, and it's going to be impossible to see them, but you know, while you have it available, you might as well put them in. And you could go in and drill them or use a Dremel, but I don't see a real point for that. So I'm just going to roughly draw these in. If you want, you just kind of outline it and then just color in the top part. I mean, you can easily, by all means, measure out and make sure that it's exactly where you want it and the size you want it. But it's not that important to me just because it's not really visible. And while I have this, okay, I'm happy with that. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to go in with my silver pin. Help that to look three-dimensional. Okay, once this all dries, we'll be pretty much done with these pieces. So here we have it. These are completely finished, and you can see sort of the differences from the original that we did. Not much difference there, but when you look at it from a side view, it definitely stands out better. Versus that one. And here's the original versus this one's definitely more like the original prop. And what's really great about what I was showing you here is that you don't have to do it this way if you don't want to. I would definitely do the upper and lower pieces here. I think that's just so much closer to the original prop that it's definitely worth the extra effort. And it's not that much extra effort. But what's great about it is if you want to, you can do the upper and lower pieces, but do this one, do the lower half in 1/4 inch instead of 1/2 inch so that it's more like this one. But then still do the top so that it is a separate piece, and you wouldn't have to do the spacers in here, and it would still stand out the same as it does here. So do this part like we originally talked about, but then do the bottom part as 1/4 inch instead of 1/2 inch, and you'd have the same effect but thinner if that's what you're going for. Now unfortunately you'd lose this larger section here for your graphic, and you'd have to have a little graphic like that again, but that would still be better than this one. It's just whatever you prefer. If you like the textured gold here, then you can do that, or if you don't like it, you can stick with this one. Just because I show you how to do a certain way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. You can still modify it to suit what you like. And I hope this has been helpful. Oh, you know what? There's one last thing. I've basically been going over the things that I mentioned in the original video series, things that I would do differently. And it's been very hard for me to clarify how I would do the rangefinder piece differently. I would just do it, but I don't think I can do it the way I wanted to, the way I've got it put together, and not have problems with the aluminum piece here. But basically what I would do is I would essentially do this exactly the same, but for this part right here, I would bevel this corner and this corner kind of like that and that, so that it's narrow right here, and then maybe a 3/16 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch, and then back out to here. Do it all the way, do this entire side, so it would be full width here, and then move back 3/16 or a 1/4 of an inch there. You don't have to, it looks fine the way it is, but if you're wanting to get closer to the actual prop, that's what I would do. I would just cut those bevels in there or sand them in, and then do everything else exactly the same way that we did it in the original video. I hope this video has been helpful. If it has, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. That way you can see the upcoming videos dealing with Sabine Wren's helmet, and then of course all of the armor and jetpacks and everything for all 3 of our favorite Mandalorians. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.